Hello, my name is Devin Shea. I'm a 20-year experienced junior architect and AEC professional. I am a BIM expert, implementation specialist, and Revit consultant. I have worked on Revit projects in over 30 different disciplines, 5 countries, 15 states, and I've worked on Revit projects in every occupancy type. As a trainer and consultant, I have taught at 7 schools and 5 Autodesk training centers. I have taught over 2,000 professionals in Revit in 2 countries and 15 states. I have been teaching engineers, architects, and artists how to draw for over 20 years. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn and YouTube and enjoy the videos.
Today we're going to go over dynamic components or adaptive components. So adaptive components in Revit are the most versatile generic models in the program. So they are used for massing systems, generic pattern-based objects, curtain panel pattern-based objects, and they're also used in Dynamo creation. So what these guys are, they are point-driven geometry, and they're literally the only thing in Revit that allows you to manipulate them in 3 dimensions. So like any of your basic 3D modeling packages like 3ds Max, you can just create a 3D mass and then grab the edges of the vertexes and then pull them around to create 3D shapes. But as we all know, Revit is very limited in its abilities to create 3D objects. So in the whole architectural process of conceptual design, Revit is a little bit lacking, and their systems of creating just conceptual design things where you're just doing sort of non-programmed shapes or whatever is a little tricky, but these adaptive components are just awesome. So just to not confuse everyone, so they're called dynamic or adaptive components. Adaptive components is the official word. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open, sorry, I'm going to get a new family. And so what we're going to do here is go to the generic model adaptive. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to open up a family. So these are created in families. So what I'm going to kind of go over, I'm going to do 2 tutorials on this. One is just going to be in sort of an intro, and the other one is we'll go into pattern-based creation on surfaces and stuff like this. And someday I'll get to a Dynamo tutorial on the same. Okay, so what we're going to do, we are in the adaptive component family right now. It is categorized as a generic model. So you go up here into your Create tab, and the difference between a regular generic model and an adaptive is you have these little point elements here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with these point elements here, and I'm just going to lay a couple on the work plane here. Okay, so these little dots are fancy little things. I'm going to select them, and then we'll have up here in the ribbon an option to make these adaptive. So what you see here is they're sort of like reference lines, but they're points. So they have all of the planes that you can set your work plane on and create geometry from them. Okay, so when you select these, you have few different settings here. So the point can either be a placement point or a shape handle point or a reference point. So a reference point essentially does nothing. The placement point allows you to place it on a 3D surface, and a shape handle is just for moving the points. So what I'm going to do here is turn this back to placement point adaptive, placement point adaptive. Okay. You also notice that these have numbers on them, and these are for sort of order of operations, which we will kind of see in a minute. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go up to the line tool, and I'm going to draw some lines here. So what I'm going to do is make sure I have my 3D snapping on the chain and make surface from closed loops. Okay, so then I'm going to hover on the dots and actually click on the dots themselves. So when I select these, you will see that we have a little transform handle here. And so what you can do is you can grab these and you can move them around. So theoretically, these two dots will connect the line here, and then you can move them around. Okay, so another thing that you can do here, I'm just going to undo, okay, get them back. The only other constraints as far as operation here is you have this orients to. So basically you can set these so they can be manipulated in any direction XYZ, or they can just be hosted on the XYYZ plane. So these are some pretty hardcore settings there, but they basically refer to the fact that if I want to constrain it just to this XYZ plane, I can, which means I can't move it on the Z or vice versa. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to just load this into my blank project, and I'm just going to place it here. So I clicked once, so you can see that I placed the point, and then I can move this around, and it even allows me to snap wherever. So again, you can't move it in 3 dimensions without certain settings. So I'm just going to put click. So when I select this guy, you'll see the 1 and the 2, which refer to the points. I can then hover around and grab these points. So then, once they're placed, I can then move it. Right, I have these set to be whatever axis, so I can move them around. And just like everything in Revit, it's sort of like 2.5D, so you can only move it on one axis at a time, basically. So that's pretty much it on that. So you can just grab these and move them around. I'm going to go back here to the family. I'm going to grab number 2 here, and I'm going to change this one to shape handle. Load that back in, overwrite. So when I click this, essentially they look just the same. So a shape handle is more for more complex geometry, which we're about to do now. So what I'm going to do here, first I'm going to show you how to create 3D shapes or whatever. So I'm going to go down here and use my set work plane. So I click set work plane, and I clicked here just to show you that. So then I'm going to just draw a simple circle here. So pretty big circle there. And what I'm going to do now is set the work plane back to normal. And then I'm going to grab this shape here and this shape here and say create surface. And now we have a 3D tube. So I can then, just like the other one, move that around, go back into the project, overwrite, and now we have a tube. And same thing, so these points are just going to act the same because you're actually manipulating the points and not the 3D object. Okay, so I'll do that a couple times. So now I'm actually going to create a new one and show you basically the differences between multiple points and 2 points. So new family, generic model, adaptive. Alright, so now I'm going to go to my reference level here. I'm going to do the same thing, create some dots, and do that. And then I'm going to select them, and make them adaptive. I'm also going to use my align tool really quick and get these lined up. I'm going to multiple selects, and then I'm going to mirror these just so they're nice and shut up. What do you mean I can't mirror them? Get out of here. I just had them on the wrong plane or whatever, but I'm just going to do this. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a rectangle here. So it technically can't do rectangles, but you're going to just make sure your chain is on here, and you're going to select 1 and 2 and hold up. What did I just do? Okay, redo that. Redo that. Alright, so draw a line. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm just connecting it to the points because you want to have all your geometry attached to these guys. So now when I go to 3D, I can see that this is now a closed shape, and I can then grab this surface here and I can extrude it. That sounds right. Okay. And so what I'm going to do now is load this one into the project. And notice how it has 4 points, so I have to click 4 times here. So I clicked once, and then twice, 3 times, and I'm going backwards 4 times. You have to make sure that you're not going in the opposite direction here. And now I have 4 adaptable points here that I can move around. So in Revit, there is no objects that you can, let's say, call this a floor, and just grab points and move it around without sloping the floor or whatever. So this allows you to manipulate them in 3D. Very nice. Okay, so I'm going to create another new family, and I call this the surface. So this would be a 2-point object, this would be a 4-point object, and now I'm going to create what I would call a surface. 3D modeling, so an organic surface, we'll see in a second. So again, back to the reference plane, and I'm going to go back to the dots here, and I'm just going to place the 1 dot and see if I can get this to mirror. So everything is groovy. Mirror, mirror. Okay, so go back to 3D. So now I have 4 points. I'm going to select these, make them adaptive. Now I'm going to use an arc here. So I'm going to come in, click twice, and then you'll notice that I'm getting a 3rd point here. So after I create that, I'm going to go back to here. So this one technically would be a reference point because it's just creating a sort of midpoint in the arch to control its geometry. So I can grab this guy and I can move that around to give it different tangential relationships, if that's a good word. Okay, So I'm going to repeat the same thing here. When I created this, it technically is show on the plane. It created a plane on this guy, so you have to reset your plane back to here. And so I'm going to do another arch here. Bam, bam. And I'm using that mill reference plane just to snap it there. What did I do? What did I do? Undo that. Do something correctly. Go back to here. Please, thank you. And once you click on this reference point, you're essentially creating, you're activating this work plane here. So put that in whatever shape. Then I'm going to grab these two arcs. I'm going to hit create form and go to solid form. So now I have a sort of a surface here that I can then manipulate. Okay, so these 2 points are currently labeled as reference points. We're going to load these in the project and you'll see the difference between the reference points and real points. So I'm just going to drop that. You have to, these are kind of squirrely in terms of you have to make sure that your direction is correct, or else it will just crisscross itself. So notice how I have 4 points here, and you can't see that reference point. So the reference point is sort of like a unmodifiable point that just is using, Revit's using the geometry for. So anyway, I'm going to go back here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these 2 points and I'm going to label these as shape handle. I'm going to load that back in. Okay, overwrite. So now you see that those points are actually in there, and you'll also notice that they have different colors to indicate that they are a shape handle and not a geometry point. So I'm going to grab this, I'm going to move them up just to kind of create the tunnel, if you will. And there you go. And also I can grab this thing here. You can also put material on these as well. So if I come in here and grab the actual surface, this, you'll see that I can put a material on them. So I can create a parameter and assign a material to them. And just like all families, it didn't really place a material, it just put the default glass generic on there. But you can create your normal material parameter and add a material as well. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is show you some practical applications for this. Shut some of my windows. Okay, so this is a lovely little sculpture that I worked on with a client here. And in here I have 2 adaptive components that I used. So in Revit, Revit is not very forgiving for curved objects. So if you try to, for instance, dimension this, it won't let you. So it's like my computer's being a little slow and cranky today. Alright, so I'm just going to grab these guys, delete them, shut up. Okay, so if I grab these, so you can just tell by looking at these that these are adaptive components. So what I did in this instance was in this crazy sculpture. These things are actually pieces of rebar that are bent to indicate hair or whatever. So when I created this, all of these hairs are sort of random because this is art, not a building architecture, but all of these hairs had different sizes and lengths and different shapes that they're bent. So I could create a generic model with an extrusion of this shape, but I would have to repeat that like 15 times. So what I did was just create an adaptive family here. So similar to what we just did in the previous example, so I just used 3 points. I set my work plane and created a circle, and then I used the line just like we did in the tube. So by putting an extra point here, this allows me to manipulate this within the file. So after I placed the hair, as they're called, I can just grab these points here and I can manipulate them. Also grab this one and move this up. So just by creating a simple 5-minute adaptive family, I can literally bend these things in Revit, because this is one of the things that are highly complicated in Revit, is getting something to move in 3 dimensions here. So just delete this guy, isolate. Okay, so another thing that I came up with for that, for the adaptive components. So if I try to go in, and I can't do it in that view anyway, but if I try to go in and do a dimension, let's say here to here, Revit just doesn't allow you to do that. So if I needed to figure out this dimension on this thing, I had to come up with a clever way to figure it out. 1 second, close some screens here so I stop being messy. One second. Okay, so now what I'm going to do here is I have this thing called Devin's measuring stick, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pick a plane. My transparency turned on, so it's a little messy. Okay, boom. So there's my plane, and then I'm going to use the pick both plane or face, either way. So now I can come in and measure this. Okay, so here is one messy. Okay, no, it didn't even go on the plane. 1 second. This is what happens when you do not practice for your tutorial. Place on the face. We're going to use the face option this time, and boom, boom. Okay, so you can see this. It's a little bit offset there, but it's still attached to the face. Okay, so with these things being here, now what I can do is I can annotate. Let me actually get a better view. Okay, so there we go. So by attaching these to the face, it then allows me 2 points to snap a dimension on. So I'm going to grab this family. I'm just going to have a quick look at it here. So it essentially is just a line that I have set to invisible, and then I placed 2 circles on the perpendicular plane. So I put these circles on here just so I can see what face that it's attached to, and then once I do that, it gives me 2 points that I can then dimension to. You also can okay, so you do see that I have a dimension there. So you can see how this is measuring here. You can do a there is a method to where you can actually put the dimension in there and it will read the dimension for you, but I just set this up really quick and it wasn't the best thing here. But you can set this up in a way that when you select it, it will basically give you the length of the element, but I don't have this set up right. Okay, so in closing, we just basically went over what is an adaptive component. We created a file, and then we just did a few basic types of what you can do with adaptive components. So we went over what is the difference between a reference point, a shape handle, and an adaptive point. And then we went over how to create a box versus a tube or whatever. And in the next tutorial, we will cover adaptive components and the use of curtain panels and pattern-based mask systems. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for stopping by. Be sure to subscribe and like and that notification thing and whatever YouTube stuff you guys do. Have a good one.